Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back or welcome to the Climate Resilient Schools Coalition. My name is Uzoma. You can call me Zuzu. My pronouns are she, they. I'm the new project manager for the Climate Resilient Schools Coalition, and this is our first coalition-wide network meeting of the school year. So thank you for joining. While folks roll in, we'll start off with some intros. You can drop your name in the chat, pronouns, what school district you're in, and let us know if this is your first meeting or if you are a returner. So for our agenda for today, we've got intros, group norms. We'll go over who we are and share an exciting announcement about the coalition. And we'll also have a panel on intergenerational organizing in the coalition and share some takeaways and next steps. So for our group norms, we just ask that folks participate with respect, humility, and have grace for others. Try to have your cameras on and your microphones muted. Share airtime when we have open discussions, and our call will be recorded so you can share with your communities or review. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Jennifer to share a little bit about who we are and what we do.
Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Feller. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of School Programs at Mass Audubon and one of the backbone team members, as we call it, of the Climate Resilient Schools Coalition. I'm so excited to see a number of first-time attendees here. Welcome, welcome. We're thrilled you're here. As a reminder to everyone and for those who are new, the Climate Resilient Schools Coalition, we've kind of reworked this a little bit, so I'm just going to read it so everyone's up to date. Brings together students, educators, school staff, and community members to advocate for meaningful, date-certain commitments to climate education and climate resilience in Massachusetts school districts, ensuring that students and communities can thrive in the face of climate change. So thank you for the feedback folks have given us on that kind of mission statement there. What that means is we're looking at both climate education and infrastructure that work together to create climate resilient schools and school districts in communities. We meet mostly as dispersed teams in the school districts around the state. There are various different teams already active and more starting. And then we come together in these network meetings that we have about once every other month to try to bring you forward with education and inspiration, resources and tools to do the work in the teams in the districts. Let's see. I want to make sure everyone's aware of our website. So if someone could put the website in the chat, that would be great. And that is a wonderful place to find out more about our history, who we are, resources, toolkits, etc. And there also is some contact information there, but you can always reach out to Zuzu. On the screen, you can see her name is Uzoma, who just introduced herself, but she's called Zuzu. And she is, as she said, our new coordinator, so a wonderful person to reach out to with questions. And I will pass it to Sarah Harp.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Karp, not to be confused with the other Sarah on this call, who will introduce herself shortly. But I am a current senior at Acton Boxborough Regional High School. I have been with the Climate Resilient Schools Coalition for about a year. And I'm one of the people who has been spending a lot of time thinking about this very exciting announcement that we have today. So as some of you may have seen in emails that went out earlier last week, the Climate Resilient Schools Coalition is launching a youth cohort for the 2024-2025 school year. So you may have noticed if you've been attending our meetings that we have had not as many students as I would like in the room with us. And we're really grateful to folks like Allie and other high school students that have been showing up to these meetings. And we also recognize that for a lot of young people, kind of a more structured opportunity, and specifically a structured opportunity that is paid, which this cohort is a paid cohort, is what folks need to learn how to do this work. And so this youth cohort is exactly that. It's a program that is going to run from the end of October to the end of May. And essentially, we are going to be kind of teaching and working with 15 high school students across the state on how do I start or support a climate resilient schools team in my school district? How do I write a resolution? How do I research a resolution? How do I build my team? How do I get that passed? And so it's very exciting for us because it means that we're going to have more young people kind of in this space with us. But to do that and to make that happen, we need your help because we need to get the word out about this program. So you can see here, we have the application link, a one-pager description of the youth cohort, and then a flyer. All of the links to these are also in our agenda document, which I dropped the link to that in the chat a few minutes ago. We have a set of priority districts, which you can view that list under the application and one-pager links. And that means that we'll be prioritizing applications from those school districts. However, we encourage any and all high school students in public schools in Massachusetts to apply because everyone will be considered. We already have about 16 applications, which is really exciting, and we also cannot wait to read more. And finally, we are so grateful, and we want to thank Cooler Communities, Revision Energy, and Mass Audubon for their generous support in making this program possible and for helping us kind of put our money where our mouth is about paying young people to do this really valuable work. And with that, I will pass it to Sarah Ross to lead us on.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, all. My name is Sarah Ross. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm out in Amherst, Massachusetts. I'm a co-founder of Undaunted K-12, a national nonprofit working on these issues, and I'm a parent out here. So I get to lead the quick district updates and questions, your questions part of the agenda. So I wanted to share a few quick national updates on items that are really relevant to this work. If you're following along with us in the notes, the first item is some exciting news from our labor partners. AFT had a national convention this summer. And I don't know if Beth Contos, if you're on, you want to come off mute and scan the participants here to see if you're here. Beth here? Doesn't look like it. Well, it was very exciting because they passed two resolutions, one related to having local chapters pursue IRA dollars in districts. So you can read that resolution. We've talked about the IRA or the Inflation Reduction Act in this venue before as a source of an exciting new federal funds to make our school buildings in particular more climate resilient. And we have many schools in Massachusetts that are already making good use of these dollars or are planning to make good use of these dollars. So this is a resolution about really organizing, all of our districts to focus in on this new funding opportunity. So you can take a look at that resolution and know that if your school district is affiliated with the AFT, that's another kind of angle to have this conversation. And then there's a second resolution they also passed, which is about extreme heat in our classrooms. So another theme that's very relevant to the idea of climate resilient school. So two good artifacts, and we're so thrilled and inspired by the leadership of AFT on these issues. The second item is around Lowell's winning application for a different pot of federal dollars, the Renew America's Schools grant. And Catherine, I think you're on. If you want to come off and say a few words about this, you should certainly do so. But this is about improving those buildings. And part of the motivation and the application was appreciating that Lowell had to close school several days because of extreme heat. And students lost out on in-person learning time. So these $15 million from the federal government are going to be paired with local resources to make improvements to those school buildings.
And Lowell is very excited about this opportunity. I think that, you know, the way that they have structured the Renew America schools, I think will make a really deep and meaningful impact, starting with the ASHRAE Level 2 energy audits that will be starting. I think currently we're in negotiations with DOE to get all our paperwork in order, that we believe that once that starts, we'll have a good blueprint for how we're going to get so many things fixed in our schools. And we're really excited about the opportunity and happy to share along in the process as we go along. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. It's such exciting work. Okay, so now it's time for updates from you. As Jennifer mentioned earlier, you know, a lot of the work that's happening is happening in local teams. That's really where the rubber meets the road. So this is our chance for local teams to share news from what's been happening in their communities. We love to hear from you, the good, the bad, the ugly, all the stuff. So I think there are some updates from Greenfield. If Ferd, if you want to kick us off, we'd love to have you. Other folks can raise their hands.
I think Doug Selwyn can actually probably say more about Greenfield than I can because I've been away.
Great.
I will say a little. Our 5 of us went to a Greenfield City Sustainable Growth Committee, part of the city government, and sort of gave an overview of what we're about in hopes that we would both generate some interest from them, but also to say we don't want to either undermine or work at cross purposes to what they're already doing. Took a long time to set up the meeting, but when we finally did, they received us very enthusiastically and gave us some handouts of what they were doing, the projects they're working on, and there's lots of overlap. So we haven't finalized any sort of anything except to confirm that we're glad each other exists, and that we want to work together going forward in those projects that we identify as benefiting from that cooperation. But we're clearly thinking in the same direction.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, good reminder that this doesn't have to be confrontational. Sometimes this is just about connecting the dots and, you know, kind of layering on to others' good thinking, because, you know, none of us has all the good ideas. So that's great.
And we had shared a draft resolution with that group.
Great. Tom, you want to hop off and see your quick Cambridge update?
Sure. Just this wasn't Climate Resilient Schools thing that happened, but I think it will become connected. I had a conversation Tuesday with the science coach for 6 to 8 in Cambridge, and they are piloting 2 new climate units for 8th graders, 6 weeks each, so they're doing 12 weeks. And one is on local climate impact and one is on the global picture. And I've already connected them with various people here. But they, I think, got a message from teachers and students that the way they were teaching climate was not connecting for students, and they really took that seriously and are working really hard on it. And I'm hoping that Patty McGaffigan, who's the science coach, will be someone we can get engaged here.
Excellent. Other district team updates, and I should say, or questions about any of this section, questions about the youth cohort, questions about the new mission statement or tweaked language of the mission statement, other general questions.
Sandra said she had a question.
Oh, great.
Or an announcement, I think.
Yes. Hi. Sorry, I have a teenager in my kitchen too with me. And so I just wanted to share an opportunity for schools and districts who are already kind of climate and sustainability minded. So that I don't know if folks have heard of the Green Ribbon Schools program, but this is an award that is given by the U.S. Department of Education, and there's basically like a state level finalist, and then there are federally recognized awardees. And there are 3 pillars to this award: reduced environmental impact and costs, which I think kind of relates to, has the school building, are there initiatives underway to make it more efficient? Improved health and wellness education, but then also environmental and sustainability education within the school. So those are sort of the 3 big criteria for the award. And I just would like to put it out there and encourage any of the schools and districts who are involved in this network to consider applying for this award. It could be there's like a trip to Washington, D.C. There's not like a lot of funding attached to it. And then it's like recognition at the federal level. But I do think that the rubric could potentially be useful for setting goals, perhaps for the school or for things to work for. So I just wanted to share that opportunity to folks. Wonderful. There are already connections out there to it. But there are some webinars coming up next month in October. So if you go to the Massachusetts Green Ribbon website, you can log on and learn more about that if you're interested. So just wanted to put that out there for folks.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other hands that I'm missing? Please don't be shy. Just come off mute and say hello. I can't see all the hands up.
I'm going to speak up. I can't figure out how to raise my hand on Zoom anymore. So
No.
I'm Becca Stendhal. I work for the Massachusetts Science and Engineering Fair. I can only be on this call for a little bit today. So I just wanted to, this is my first meeting. I'm a climate resilience person in other worlds, but from MSEF's perspective, we'd love to encourage schools that are working in this sphere to use the science fair platform to both discover what's going on in their community, in their schools, use it as sort of a public education piece, or other ways we can amplify that work. So we have connections with a lot of the schools that you're targeting through this work. So I've done some outreach on the behalf of this coalition, but if there's any opportunities in the future, I'd love to explore them. So
Awesome. Thanks, Becca. Nice to see you. Any other updates or questions? I can tell you guys all want to get to the intergenerational organizing panel. So without further ado, why don't I pass it over to Zuzu and Sarah to do just that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys for those updates. It's really exciting. I'm also excited to sort of jump into this discussion. One of the goals of the coalition is to strengthen intergenerational collaboration. We want to expand our reach to students and young people and sort of cultivate a community where younger and older members can learn from and inspire one another. We want young people to have opportunities to lead, but also benefit from the guidance and support of older folks who work in similar fields and are also passionate. So I'm excited to open discussion to those who have experience working in intergenerational settings. Time allowing, we'll have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go on. Panelists, you can introduce yourselves with your names, pronouns, the intergenerational organization you are a part of, and how long you've been involved with the Climate Resilient Schools Coalition. Tom, I will pass it to you first, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure. So my name is Tom Rawson. I'm in Cambridge. And I use he, him pronouns. And I'm working in a couple of different places in terms of intergenerational work. I'm on the advisory board for Spring Forward, which is a youth-founded and youth-led climate education organization in which high schoolers teach middle school and elementary school students about climate change. And in addition to working here with the coalition for, I don't know how long, whenever it started. And I'm also a couple of us set up a project which we're waiting to see if it gets funding from Mass Humanities to do intergenerational climate conversations through the Mass Audubon with the Mass Audubon Youth Climate Leadership Program out of Drumlin Farm. So I'm hoping to work on that. I worked on getting it proposed, but we'll have to see if it gets funded.
Thank you so much. Holly, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, I'm Allie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm on the Arlington team for the coalition. And I've been working on this team for about this past year. I started in spring of 2024.
Okay, last but not least, Brittany.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany. I'm the Climate Change Education Program Manager for Mass Audubon. I use she, her pronouns. And the group that I work with the most is the Youth Climate Leadership Program, which is a Mass Audubon staff and partner supported, but totally youth led is the goal, program doing youth climate summits across the state. And I am also with Tom, an advisory member for the Spring Forward. And I've been on this coalition since it started.
Awesome. Thank you all. Yeah, so part of the reason that kind of we're wanting to have this conversation in the first place is with this youth cohort, we're hoping that kind of this space is about to become much more intergenerational. And kind of to start us off, we've now used the word intergenerational like 15 times. And I think at least kind of in my world, that can be a little bit of a buzzword. And so I'm hoping that we sort of can just start at kind of a basic level, thinking about what intergenerational means to you. And I think if we want to just go in that same order, Tom, if you want to kick us off, that would be great.
Sure. I'll be brief. I was thinking about this question when Zuzu sent it out, and I realized that the formal definition of the term means across generations, right? And it would incorporate a wide range of ages. But what it has always meant to me in the climate space, particularly as an elder, is working between elders organizations, which I'm part of, and youth. And that seems to be a very powerful alignment. And so that's what it's come to mean for me, even though that's not the technical definition of the word, I guess.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. And for me, it's always been youth specifically in schools, aligning themselves and collaborating with educators or just other adults within the town. And I think that I've noticed these intergenerational teams leveraging three different things. I think first are different experiences, because as students, we have a lot of different experiences with how climate change education is taught in our schools right now. But adults have a lot of experiences already advocating for this policy and also in the workplace, like the most effective ways to advocate for this policy. And then I also think leveraging different resources, because once again, adults are often in more professional spaces. And as kids, since we are in the schools, we often have connections to administration or other teachers who might be willing to hear us out from a student's perspective.
I'll add, to me, it seems like it's this wonderful space where people of all different life stages come together and add skills and experiences and enthusiasm to make something far better than could have been achieved alone.
Thank you guys so much. If people want to share a bit more about the intergenerational team they're a part of, how that's been going for you, who you work with, what you guys work on.
I don't think I have a lot more to share than what I said in the intro. It's it's, I described for Spring Forward, I described what Spring Forward does, and they've been extremely successful at it. They've, delivered dozens or hundreds of workshops, and uh, haven't always been very well known, except, inside this community, they're well known, but in the world in general, not as much, which that's one thing to think about, because I think that often happens. But I don't have a lot more to say about who they are and what they do. The role that I play there is I'm on the advisory board. And so the organization is run by the young people. And the role that I'm playing is, when we have a meeting and there are questions, we talk about them, but the day-to-day operation is not really something that I've been involved in. And I actually really like that role. It seems to work really well. I'm not sure what else to say unless you have more questions, Zuzu.
That's great. I just want to see if folks had anything specific details to add, but thank you for sharing. I think I'd really like to know sort of how you guys have been able to build community in your intergenerational organizations. If anyone wants to share on that.
I think specifically in Arlington, a lot of different environmental initiatives they're very intersectional. So for instance, I'm working with a lot of people on this coalition team that I've worked with in other environmental spaces. So I think that's one big thing, is that I think that the larger Arlington environmental community is really interconnected. So that makes the intergenerational community on the specific coalition team already really familiar, and we know each other pretty well. And then I think the second thing is just very broadly, we're all united around the same mission, because at this coalition meeting, we really have the goal of bringing more climate education and more climate-friendly infrastructure into our schools. So it's really easy to collaborate because we really are just working towards the same goal.
So I have been doing this work at Mass Audubon for about 8 years now, and it is a big focus of what we do is to build community in our groups. It's the only way we're going to get stuff done. And the thing that I found has really worked the best is to just remember that it's so important to include fun elements when we're working together, things that keep people coming back and keep people energized. We need to have positive experiences together in order to keep people involved, avoid burnout, foster these deeper connections. We're working on something really tough. And so keeping this human aspect and this fun aspect together really has done the most in building community.
Thank you. I wanted to know if folks have encountered any challenges in navigating intergenerational organizing, and if so, how have you addressed them?
The thing I thought of when I saw that question is actually something that I think it is a challenge for youth organizations, and I thought, okay, well, how can I as an adult be helpful at this? But every time I talk about it, the young people have already figured it out. And that challenge is leadership transition, because people are moving on. Most of the young people I've been working with are high schoolers, and often the leaders are juniors and seniors. And so there's very quick turnover. But I've been very, I don't know, I'm no longer surprised by it, but at the beginning I was surprised to see that the organizations had that well under control. Now it seems to be, I'm sure it can be difficult in some organizations, but the ones that I have worked with, I haven't seen that. People have really had it together and been very aware of developing and bringing up leaders from younger grades, and it's worked really well.
Ellie, would you want to jump in and add?
Yeah, this is a very small challenge, but I think that even something as simple as like schedules across different generations is very different. Because for instance, being a student, we're in school 6.5 hours a day, and that's generally many adults' work time. And if like the coalition is part of their job, for instance, if they're at town position, then you can't ask a student to meet during the school day, and you can't ask someone to necessarily meet outside of their work hours. So just even considering like those very simple logistical hurdles.
I can add one more, is that my job is actually to work with other adults who are working with youth-led teams across the state. And so it has been an interesting, I don't want to say struggle, but it's been an interesting journey to have people realize what youth are capable of and what it actually means for something to be youth-led. That it's not just like picking the colors or the food for the event, but it's like picking the speakers and the theme and talking to the speakers and finding the space and doing the budget and doing all the outreach. Like youth are completely capable of that. And so it's something that I think we just have to keep reminding ourselves of like what it means to actually have a youth-led program.
Awesome.
Can
Well,
I add
that's
something
awesome.
to?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
No, you drove.
I just wanted to add something to that. I was going to say this when we talked about the challenges, because I realized Zuzu had asked us about challenges, like, or not about challenges, but about what advice would I have for young people about working with adults. But really, mostly what I was thinking about is what advice I would have for adults about working with young people. And it's exactly what Brittany just said. The only thing that young people are sometimes not capable of doing is being old enough to have a driver's license and drive themselves to a meeting. And everything else, like for adults, and anything you think, well, are the young people going to be okay to do that? The answer is yes. You know, there's really nothing that I've seen in my work where what young people needed was for adults to kind of take on things that they couldn't do. They do everything in those spaces, and that's really what it means for something to be youth led. Is, you know, I feel like my role is often to stay out of the way and answer questions if somebody has them. And you know, maybe occasionally I would think of something that somebody hadn't thought of, but really the young people in the organizations I've participated in are just capable of running everything. And it's great. It's really inspiring. It's exciting. It's really a privilege to be part of. And that was, you know, that was something I was thinking about a lot in preparation for this.
Thank you all so much. And I think, you know, that kind of thread of possibility, I think, really resonates with my own experiences, right? That like part of growing as a young person doing this is also realizing more and more of what's possible. So I think that's kind of can sometimes be a learning journey that that folks take together. Tom kind of already led us here, but my next question sort of is this, and I'll let kind of answer either way or both ways. Either, you know, what you would want adults to know about how to effectively work with young people, or sort of the reverse, what you want young people to know about how to effectively work with adults. So I know, Tom, you already kind of answered this for us. So either Brittany or Allie, if one of you wants to jump in.
Sure, I can say what I thought about for advice to youth is that please be patient with adults. We're learning, we want to do our best, and you just need to tell us what kind of support you need when you need it. We're there for you. And then also give us feedback if something isn't working. So like, let's say we like come up with a solution together and we try it and it's like falling flat completely, but the adult doesn't realize at all. Please let us know. We want this to work for everybody.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that conversation about something that adults can keep in mind when working with children, I think, or just with students, no matter the age group, I think that I've noticed that my peers and just students within like environmental advocacy are really capable and also really driven. So if you and adults in general open up space for us to take on more responsibility, then we definitely will and we'll step up to that. But sometimes it can feel intimidating to make that request to take on more responsibility because as a student, you're not sure where your bounds within a group are. So I think it's sometimes important for adults to keep in mind that as students, we're just really trying to figure out where we fit into the group so that we can still be respectful of adults while also just really sharing our want to participate more and to take on more responsibility within groups.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm hearing a lot about sort of setting group norms around boundaries, communication, how much of a workload everyone is taking on. I think these are all really important things to sort of outline in your intergenerational group. One more question to ask. I wanted to know if there's anything that has surprised you all about working in intergenerational spaces. And Brittany, if you want to take this one, you can jump in.
I couldn't find the unmute button. How long have we been doing this? Oh dear. All right. So I guess I would say I'm surprised every day. Like I'm surprised at the amount that we can get done working together and how excited people are to hear about the collaborations that we have, how hopeful it makes people, both youth and adults, when they hear about the work that we're doing and they see what's happening in the communities. And that has surprised me, but also it's what keeps me going.
Well, thank you all for answering our questions today. I feel like there's a lot of negative connotations around what it means to handle or organize an intergenerational space. So I'm really happy that you guys have shared what you feel works best for you, your challenges, etc. I wanted to open the floor for questions. We do have some in the chat. So I'll pass it over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Zuzu, and thanks to Allie and Brittany and Tom for sharing your insights. We've had lots of questions coming into the chat. And I will actually, first I'll introduce myself. My name's Emma Scudder. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a member of the backbone team of the coalition, and I work at Mass Audubon. So I see a question in the chat. Can you speak to the barriers that students might face from older faculty in their schools that might not prioritize their interest or believe in the necessity of addressing climate change? So this could, maybe, can I pass it over to you, Allie, just to jump off and maybe over to Tom next?
Yeah, well, I think the issue when trying to push for action in such a structured environment, such as a school or a school district, is that often it can come down to one person or one administrator that can either like really, really hold your team back or is the step you need to push it forward. So I think if you have a situation where there is someone in that position of power who is less receptive to student voice or just to environmental advocacy at large, then I think that can be a really big roadblock. And as students, we might not be given the opportunity to, or we might just not be able to change that mind overnight. So then I think it comes down to, once again, utilizing maybe the resources, connections, experiences of the adults who might be able to be perhaps more respected by that person, unfortunately, and B, might have more knowledge about how to navigate that situation. So there are some circumstances where pushback from students just doesn't come off well for adults in authority, and recognizing that that can be unfortunate and that that is one spot where adults can step up.
Yeah, thank you. And Tom or Brittany, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add, not a lot. The only thing I would add is that a lot of youth organizations are not working inside that kind of environment. And so, excuse me, if they run into somebody who's not sympathetic, they have the option to just go talk to somebody else, which, as Ali said, doesn't work in a structured environment like a school. But so I think that's helpful. I don't have much else to say about schools. I guess the one thing I would add about schools is that every community has a school committee with a variety of people on it. And yeah, some of them are probably pretty monolithic, but I think a lot of them, you can find a sympathetic person on the school committee if you don't find a sympathetic person within the school. And those people can have some influence.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks for adding that. I saw earlier that Doug had his hand up. Doug, do you still have a question?
Thanks. I was going to say, and will say, that we as mostly gray hairs have never figured out how to effectively connect with what we know are young people organizing around us. We have often similar interests, but we have not been very effective at reaching out and making those connections work. So it's not because we don't think young people can do it. We've seen them do it. We see them do it. But figuring out how to be most effective at making those connections and then having those connections actually go somewhere. I feel like the groups that I've been part of have not been so effective at doing it. So I would like suggestions or insights in terms of where it's worked, how that's happened. Thank you.
Great question, and very actionable. What are your best tips for making those connections with the gray hairs? Doug said it, not me. From our panel. Brittany, do you have any thoughts on that?
We have found the most success through schools, through green teams, because those are already youth who are self-selected as being interested. And figure out your pitch, Doug. Figure out what are you offering youth here? You know, what is in it for, not for them, you know, it's not like a selfish thing, but like, how can you add to what they're already doing? Where are you adding a piece that they don't have or a connection they don't have? I'm sure you have great connections in your community that maybe the youth haven't had time to foster yet. And so coming into the group being like, hey, I'm a resource. Let's chat. You know, how can I work with you? Might be your best way in. And you're also in my region, Doug, so we can connect because we do have some YCLP team forming in Greenfield right now. So please feel free to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat.
This actually made me think of a question, which would be for Ali or Brittany or any of the other youth, which is I'm a retired middle school teacher, and I think it would have been, there was not a lot of student activism around climate. We did a lot of teaching around climate. There wasn't a lot in the time I was teaching. But I think there's some difference here that I don't fully understand between middle school and high school. That high school students have room to feel and express more agency. Because I don't think the middle school students I worked with probably would have come to me and said, let's do this. That wasn't the kind of relationship they had with their teachers. And I'm curious if anybody has comments about that.
Yeah,
Ali, great, go ahead.
Yeah, I could speak a little bit about that transition from, I guess, middle school to high school. So I think the big thing, at least in my town, is that in high school is when you do have a lot of that agency. It's when kids are really have free reign to engage in whichever like extracurriculars they want to engage in. They're often getting themselves to meetings, so they're less dependent on, you know, parents being on board. And just in general, that piece about extracurriculars is I think high school is when a lot of people start like engaging in extracurriculars, engaging in clubs. So if you're a high school student and you're starting to choose, hey, what am I interested in? And climate change is something that interests you, then many schools do have that green team option. And then that's when kids start to get connected. I think in middle school, there's less of a culture around like clubs and extracurriculars, at least in my town. So we don't really see that connection until high school.
That's a great point that you raised. And I just want to acknowledge too, Karen asked in the chat about ways for adults outside of schools to connect with students in schools, which I think we got at a bit. But I wanted to give the opportunity for Karen to come off mute if you had anything else you wanted to add to your question, or if you felt that your question was answered.
I think that Doug's question addressed part of it. I think also I'm a retired elementary school teacher, but I think the activism that like Allie that you're representing is often focused at the schools and you know, and on the buildings that you are studying in. And so like for those of us who are working in the same community but outside of the schools, sometimes I think it's asking you guys for an extra level of energy to try to connect with those outside groups, and never mind all the complications of timing and schedules and whatnot. And so sometimes I think that that's another challenge. It's just like we would love to support. I'm in the Acton-Boxborough School District, so we would love to support efforts. And we do have conversations with the high school students in the resource force, but it's sometimes hard to make those. It's hard to be supportive because we're outside the school day, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Karen. And I'd throw that question out to Allie or to Sarah Karp, since you mentioned Acton-Boxborough. If you have any response.
And I think we have another student from Acton-Boxborough on the call as well today.
Okay, well then, yes,
I know,
please.
Zach, my
chime in.
neighbor, guys. Lives like 4 doors down from me. I'm happy to take this one, and Allie, if you have more, you can jump in. I think that's a great question. And I think that part of what's tricky is that I think that like community's relationship to the schools in a given school district looks really different. And so there are some places like Acton where I feel like the whole community kind of revolves around the school and around education. And that's not going to be true everywhere. I do think, kind of continuing to like make the ask of just like, no pressure, but like I am a community member that is like here to support you in any way that you need. And I think that, it's also okay if like a student's response to that is like, thank you. Right now, I don't know that we need your support. And like we'll reach back out when we do, because there will be points when like, they do like we do need community members to show up to a school committee meeting. But I think, sometimes that can be part of youth leadership is like, letting go for a minute and kind of but still making sure that it's known that you are there to support, because I think that sometimes just that sentiment can go a long way. And then I'll also say, I think that with this coalition in particular, like we understand that a lot of these district teams are going to be based within a school and within like the school environmental club. And I think it is really important for us to kind of together, and I don't have an answer to this, but to think about how do we build kind of more coalition within our own districts? How do we go beyond one school? Because particularly in school districts where there are, 5, 10 high schools, it's really important that like this work is focused on all of those schools and not just kind of like one building where students are.
Thanks.
All right. And I see Amber Schmidt. You have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. And sorry, I'm going to stay off camera. I don't know whether it's the difference between Teams and Google Meet and Zoom, but my has my camera's frozen quite a bit today. But I really kind of like from just a program that I'm working on with a student in a high school on food waste diversion and kind of like a low-hanging fruit of implementing share tables and this idea of having that one person who is the ultimate decision maker and a barrier. What I've found is that the student being extremely passionate about this, we've reached out to several principals. The bureaucracy always kicks back to this one person, and there's this mentality that this is a passing agenda, that maybe it's just this one student or just a handful of students that care about this, and that in a year or 2 years they're going to graduate, and it's not going to make a difference. Then the school can continue with the status quo, and this idea that in this type of situation with schools and bureaucracy, that time really goes against our favor. And how do we continue to create the accountability across all the levels of the grades? And then also, to others' points of, if you're working with multiple high schools or multiple middle schools, how do we get that collaboration so that that accountability and that urgency stays there, even though students are moving up in grades and ultimately going to graduate out of the school?
I have one thought about that, which just goes back to the school committee thing that I mentioned, and also realize if that's happening, I would start talking to other people in the community, because if you're getting a bureaucratic response to what you want to do, then so are they, even if they're not talking about climate, because that's the culture of the district. And shifting the culture goes back to me, to the school committee. So you might have to take on a larger set of questions.
Anything else there? Allie, do you want to add something?
Yeah, specifically to that point about how in schools, like students in particular are always cycling through. And if you have a student who might be super passionate, but they graduate in a year, that presents a problem for like the continuation of the program. Something that my district does a pretty good job of with all sorts of different clubs, but we're starting to do with environmental advocacy, is trying to form that connection between like the high school and younger grades. And I know that we spoke a little bit about how middle school students aren't always the most involved. But often if you do have, say, a middle school team, and then you can have high schoolers coming to that middle school team and mentoring, if you will, then that's kind of like an intergenerational team within the youth generation. And that can go a long way to making sure that people stay involved.
Expanding our definition of intergenerational. I love it. That brings us full circle. We do have time for one more question. I see Ferd, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure how this fits, but so there are a couple of us here who are part of the Mass Teachers Association Climate Action Network. And so we've been trying with modest success at connecting members of our network, or at least people who are on our mailing list, which is about 400 educators, with teams that either have formed or are trying to form. And I don't want to exaggerate the success of that, but I think it's an important and useful model that when we can connect teachers who are either active or retired with groups of students and others, it adds to what's possible, because teachers are also often active in their community. And so the question of how do we bring people from the community in, the union network can maybe help with that as well.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. Teachers have really been crucial in the effort too. to build a more intergenerational coalition for CRS, and thanks to MTA and AFT and our partners and our teachers who are here with us in the coalition, that's been possible. So I'm going to hand it on over to Jennifer Feller to take us home.
All right. Well, I actually want to give my take on an answer or a thought about two questions that came up, one from Doug and one from Amber, and then I will wrap up. But you asked about, how do outside groups, like these barriers around, it seems like outside groups have trouble getting youth to participate, or youth might have trouble getting maybe adult members from the community to participate. One thing we've noticed, or I've noticed, is that there's a difference between asking youth to join your group, like I have a set of priorities and I want youth to join me. That's one thing. Versus, I wonder what the youth's priorities are and I'm willing to go in and help them. So, and it goes both ways. There are young people saying, why won't the grown-ups help me? Well, did you ask what their priorities are first? So it's that first step, or backing up and going to staff, maybe the property staff or the nutrition staff in the school, and saying, what are your priorities? What do you think might be a good solution to, food waste? Or from the other side, I'm really interested in building codes, and changing the building codes in our town. Like, is that something of interest to you? And the students may say, not really. So it's like that moment of asking, what's your priority? And then it may be that you have different priorities. And as Ali said in the beginning, the reason the intergenerational spaces work is when those priorities are aligned. So just backing up and doing that alignment in the beginning, or even in the middle, and taking a pause and seeing where you can realign can help a lot. And another tip that I realized is that remember that you don't always have to go to the climate committee or the green team in the school. It may be that you have a team around mental health, or you have a young team around air quality, or just, there are other priorities that align with climate change that may not have climate or environment in the title, but they still might be really relevant. So just that you have other avenues as well. Okay, so we can go to our slide. Look at that. Aligned thinking with Zuzu and I. Okay, some takeaways. So first, these are the ones that we came up with ahead of time. And then I have a whole list that you just said, and I'm just going to wrap them up. I will say that there will always be mistakes. So just accept that. It's going to happen. You're going to say something wrong in a group. It's going to be okay. You're going to apologize and move on. Or you're going to try and it won't work the first time, and then you try again. One very technical tip is just to assign roles in a meeting and then switch those very specifically. Who's the facilitator, who calls on people, who keeps time, stuff like that. But giving people a structured role is a way in. Take a moment in the beginning to define your group norms and ask youth in particular how they want to be invited in. Or maybe your job is to ask the adults how they want to be invited in, and agree on those norms. And then remind yourself at the beginning of each meeting of what your norms are. And then just a reminder that I can't remember who said about having fun. I think Brittany said about having fun, and we'll just also add get to know each other as people. Maybe try to find a moment where you can get together in person. It's really hard, but it's just a nice way to make the work sticky and lasting, is when you actually know each other. Okay, and here's what our panel said and what came up from the discussion. We're going to go through them fast. 1, clarify your shared goals in the beginning. We're at 5. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm going to go so fast. I'm just going to say, remember to focus on your younger members and building a pipeline from the middle school. Be really cognizant of when you schedule meetings. Be aware of the difference between youth-led and intergenerational. They are not the same thing. So think carefully about what it is you're after. Remember to make allies, other folks in other places who can speak to the folks who are being stubborn. Youth, ask for the support you need. Be patient with adults. We don't always know the support you need. And okay, that's pretty good. That was a rundown. It's 5 o'clock. I'm so grateful for everybody's tips and tricks and willingness to keep trying, even if it hasn't worked the first year or the second year. Keep trying. These intergenerational spaces are powerful. So that is what we are trying to do here together. We can all support each other. I see so many connections being made in the chat, which is incredible. And Zuzu, do you want to close us out, or am I closing us out with next steps?
I can go ahead and share our next steps.
Okay, great.
So thanks everybody for joining. Thank you for participating in our panel and having so many questions. First up, spread the word about our youth cohort to your networks within your communities. We want to get students to apply. This is open to Massachusetts public school students in grades 9 to 12. Convene with your district teams, meet up with them again. Last bits of the summer, just meet up one more time. And also we ask you increase the intergenerational diversity of your teams, and you have all these resources now and knowledge about how to do so. So thank you everybody for joining. It's great to see everyone, and I'm excited for how we'll go forward. Bye.